everybody. Welcome back to a second episode of Aux Fiends. I'm here. I'm Rishabh. I'm here with my co-host Mateo. I'll let Mateo introduce himself once more here.
Hey, I'm Mateo. Aux Fiends co-host.
Aux Fiends co-host. Yep.
Yep.
And we're returning to talk about another album. If you haven't listened to the first episode where we discuss Daft Punk's album Discovery, be sure to listen to that. Just as a reminder, the way this podcast works is that we essentially take turns and we pick an album and then we discuss it. And as we mentioned in the first episode, me and Mateo can have, I think it's safe to say, diverging tastes.
Definitely.
Yeah, definitely. And in the first episode, we went to neutral ground because I think we both just absolutely love Discovery as an album, and we are big fans of Daft Punk. So this time there was a coin toss for who would get to pick the album. And I think you can tell by Mateo's reaction that I was the winner of that coin toss.
Sadly,
and
yeah.
So I picked, as you probably already know by clicking on this video or on Podomatic or wherever you're listening, I picked Melodrama, which is the second studio album by a New Zealand singer, Lorde. Now, I think most people probably know about Lorde since she's basically had a number of breakout hits, a lot of radio airplay for sure. Obviously, I think easily the most famous singles that people know her from are Royals, which was from one of her albums called Pure Heroine, and as well as I think it was Tennis Court, which I think a lot of people have also heard. So this is her second studio album. This was released through Universal and a number of other record labels. It's categorized here on Wikipedia as pop and electropop. Obviously, we're going to go do a track breakdown, talk about each of the tracks and sort of their influences. And again, the singer is Lorde. It was also produced by Lorde, including a couple of different other producers, including Flume, who I have listened to a few tracks from. I really like the music that Flume has done. Other producers include Joe Little, Andrew Wyatt, Frank Dukes, Jack Antonoff, and Malay. And Lorde herself, of course, as I said earlier, was a producer. I'm just going to talk a little bit about why I picked this album now.
Okay.
And for me, it's mostly because I used to absolutely love this album. I was sort of a fan of Lorde's. I mean, I'd listened to some of the more popular tracks for sure from her previous albums and whatever was on the radio. And I'm not exactly sure I remember how I came across this particular album. I think it might have been by listening to the first track on this album, Green Light, which also got a lot of radio airplay in its time, which, by the way, is 2017 is when this album came out. And I used to listen to this album pretty much all the time. And it kind of got me more into music and more into just different sorts of genres. And before what I'm guessing is going to be a not so rave review from Mateo, I'm just gonna say this, Mateo. You can feel free to agree or disagree already. But to be fair, I would say that this, obviously Wikipedia calls it pop and electropop, but I would say this album actually has a number of different genres going for it, which is kind of similar to our previous album that we talked about, Discovery, where it's kind of a there's obviously like a major theme running through all of it, but there's also sort of different influences. But that's sort of the background around the album, and I'll go into different tracks now, and I'll also talk a little bit about what I particularly liked about these tracks before and what I like about it now. Since for me, the picking this album, a lot of it had to do with wanting to revisit it because it had been a considerably long while since I'd listened to it. I wanted to see if, an album that I liked when I, like a couple years ago, it's I guess 3 years ago now, whether that would, age as well as I might think it would. So I think without wasting any more time, let's get into the track breakdown.
So right before you go into the track breakdown, I feel like I need to preview at least not my eyes, but my ears going into this album when you gave me the heads up about a couple days back. Let me just say...
Okay.
I basically went in blind. You were right. I think I had heard maybe one Lorde song.
I'm sure you listened to Royals, before. Right?
I mean, that was kind of familiar, but I had never heard any song off this album. Lorde is definitely not my type of music I listen to. Anything kind of like this, So let's just say I went in definitely hesitant and expecting to absolutely dislike it. Now, I'm not
Okay.
saying any spoilers yet. I think we got to save that track by track. So I think we can jump into the tracks now. But I just need to
Okay.
preface all that. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, I kind of knew you would probably not love this album, but it's one that, well, again, not getting into spoilers, at least I can say I really loved before. So again, for me, it was about revisiting it. So I'm definitely curious to hear what you think. And actually, we'll get started on that right now because we're going to start with you. Tell us what you thought about the first track, which is Green Light.
Okay. What I thought about Green Light.
Oh, that's an interesting voice.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, I wrote it down. I liked it more than I thought originally.
Okay.
Like just going in, I was definitely pretty hesitant into going into this album. I think it was a good song to start off with. I can definitely
Mhm.
see how this could be either a track favorite or an album favorite of the album. I could definitely feel like I could hear Green Light like on the radio or
It
something.
was. Yeah,
I
it was
felt
a
like
lot
this
on the
was
radio.
probably the maybe most popular off this album. I could
Yeah,
be wrong. I'm not 100% sure.
you're right, I
But
think.
like,
Yeah.
yeah, I like the song. I even put like a little check mark next to it. Like, it's
Mhm.
not a favorite of mine, and I don't know how often I'd go back to listen to it. But
Mhm.
like, off the rest of the album, I definitely say that this was definitely higher up there. I got some actually like weird Coldplay vibes, like around the like minute and a half mark. I'm not sure if you
Yeah.
got that at all. Like, I almost like it felt like same kind of beats that like Coldplay would use or something like that. And so I thought it
Mhm.
was actually pretty interesting. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, Coldplay is an interesting comparison. I think maybe earlier Coldplay than current Coldplay. I think current
Yeah.
Coldplay is just very, very into the pop zone. Yeah, I think this is one of, I think probably definitely easily the most popular track off the album. I think the way that I remembered is that Lorde released both Greenlight and then another track, Liability, which we'll talk about in a
Hmm.
few minutes here. Those were the first two singles to be released off the album, and those are. I was sort of looking through the Spotify most popular tracks for Lorde, and from this album, both Greenlight and Liability were up there, and those are the two that I distinctly remember hearing. As for my review, I obviously this is a very famous song, and I still think it holds up fairly well. I would say I didn't love it as much as some of the other tracks on here. I wouldn't say it's my least favorite either, but I think it's a solid. I guess this is where I would definitely agree with the Wikipedia page and sort of that it's an electro pop song. I like the upbeat tonality here. I like how the chorus is kind of set. Again, there's sort of a very dance album tune, but also like a pop tune angle to the song. It's, slightly musically distinct. I like the ending. It's sort of dramatic. And that kind of, I guess a lot of the track reviews here will kind of tie into larger album reviews. And because I am a fan of Lorde, I've seen some of her interviews and stuff. And I know that this is an album that she made with, I guess, dance music sort of in mind. But also, I guess, according to the Wikipedia page here, there's also a lot of pop influences. And if you look at a producer like Flume, that's very electro pop. So I think this is, I like kind of the aspirational tone of this song. It kind of gets your blood pumping, and it's definitely much better. I'm sure you would agree here, Mateo. Much better than a lot of the songs that we get on the radio these days. And I know you don't listen to the radio
Yeah.
pop
I was
songs a
gonna
lot,
say
but yeah,
that. Yeah.
yeah, it's definitely just more musically interesting than a lot of just like the very mechanical, some of
Okay.
the more
Yeah.
mechanical pop songs, you
I'll
know?
I'll definitely give it that. I'll give it that.
Yeah.
It was definitely more interesting than
Mhm.
even though it's so infrequent. The just other random just kind of radio songs I might hear. I definitely thought it had a little more creativity, you could say, in
Yeah.
it.
For sure. And in fact, I'd echo your sentiments. I would say that this is easily like not one of the best songs on the album. I wouldn't say it's the worst. I think it's, yeah, like you said, a solid opener. I think it kind of comes
Hmm.
in and sets the tone for the rest of the album, but I think the best songs of the album are further down. But Greenlight's good. I think it's also easily one of the ones that I understand why it's so popular on the radio. It can be listened to on radio. It has enough sort of a pop vibe to it where I think, people will enjoy it over the radio as well. So yeah, I like this song, and I'm a little surprised you like it, Mateo, as much as you do. But which
Well,
is
well,
because it's
comparing it,
easily one of the more pop ones. So I find that interesting. But that's cool
I'm
that you liked it.
yeah, I'm not again. I'm not totally against pop. Actually, I really
I
like
know.
pop, a lot of older stuff, but I guess for newer, more recent pop,
Mhm.
yeah, no, I can see how you can think that's surprising coming from me. Maybe I just kind of thought about it a little more afterwards. I listened to the whole album, so I'm not sure what that says. That I like this song better definitely than some others
Okay.
on this album. So, but
I have some guesses as to which ones those are, but we'll get into it when we get
we'll
there.
get into it when we get into it. That's all I'll say.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so that's Green Light. So we'll move on to the second track now, which is called Sober. Mateo, I'll ask you to start us off here again.
Okay, and I'm not sure if you'd be surprised or I don't know what, but this Sober was definitely, I think, my least favorite track.
I'm a little surprised. I don't think it's quite that bad, but go ahead.
To go into my thought process a little bit, I had marked a couple that I didn't love at first towards the end. It was actually easier to find the ones I did like. There was a few, but I just felt so neutral, I guess, kind of towards the album. So it was kind of hard to figure out the one I didn't like feel any towards way, like going to more towards the negatives, than the others. Yeah. I'd say it's almost the complete opposite of like Discovery, where it was just so hard just to figure out a song I like loved more than the others, where this one is just like just to figure out what song I felt something that just wasn't some neutrality against it and kind of the negatives but like going into it, I did like for one positive for it, I did like the backtrack over it, like I like the instrumental and stuff behind it, but then for the majority of the song I felt it was kind of like a lead-in song, if you know what I mean. I was kind of waiting for it to amp up, and in the end, like towards the end half, it actually kind of did, but it became kind of exactly what I didn't want it to amp up into. It just like it was just like a light on a candle, and it just kind of like blew out, and I just didn't like it. No confetti, no nothing. I was just like, whatever,
Okay.
Sober listening to this. That's all I can say, I guess.
Well, that's a little harsh. I'll just say that. I really like this song.
Okay.
I thought you would like this more than Green Light, which is why I was surprised. I mean, I really like it, and I thought you would like it more than Green Light. Just because, well, first of all, there's some creative sampling in the beginning, which I think isn't so much in Green Light. I think Green Light plays out more like a typical pop song. And then it has, again, sort of an upbeat tonality, similar to Green Light. Again, a lot of the things that I think tie most of these songs in the album are sort of those dance rhythms, actually. And yeah, I actually really like this track. I think it's creatively produced. The singing, of course, is really good here as well. I think, to be honest, kind of getting into the whole album review, I think Lorde's a fantastic singer and songwriter. And we'll talk about lyrics more in a couple other more interesting songs, lyrically at least. Again, I think the singing's great here. I like the chorus here. I kind of like how, as an artist, she'll stop the music and kind of have sort of spoken word sort of sprinkled around everywhere. It sounds like you're not so excited on that part.
No, I do not like that, and I think Lorde does that a good amount.
Yeah, it's definitely something she kind of repeats throughout a lot of songs, which is something I really like. And I'm curious to see, I'm trying to understand why you don't like that. I mean, what specifically do you not like about that?
I don't know. I mean, there's other songs I feel that do that a lot as well. And there's even some songs that I think do it well.
Yeah.
But I guess specifically in Sober, it's just, it's hard to explain. It's just kind of the opposite of the repetition I do like. You know what I mean? Because I talked about with Discovery, I really love repetition and kind of the break and stuff, and kind of just the fluidity with different songs and how it kind of breaks and keeps going and whatnot. But I just didn't like how it was done, and I felt like the whole amount of this song.
I was just going to say is that it's not so much spoken word as much as like a staccato, like kind of just like chopped up voice in Sober. There's a couple places where she literally stops the music and then speaks, but I mean, I know what you're saying.
I didn't like it. I don't know.
Okay.
It's hard to come to different words other than I just didn't like this, I guess, the most out of all the other songs. I mean, this wasn't your favorite, was it? I forgot if you said that.
Okay, well, here's the thing. I put it as favorite question mark, but I wouldn't say it's my favorite.
Okay, but you, not to spoil it for later on, but you do have a favorite that you put down, though, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay.
I would say I do. It was hard, actually, for me. It was almost as hard as Discovery, because
Whoa.
This is how much I like this album. I'm serious. I'm trying not to, like, over-exaggerate in any way.
No, but, that's fair. It's fair.
Yeah, I really do. And I think Sober is In my top tracks, I wouldn't say it's my favorite though. I'm sort of struggling with it as I speak though, because it feels sort of like a treason against the song since I really like it. Another thing I forgot to mention about the song that's really good is how they use the trumpets or the horns in the background too. I think that's worth mentioning as well. But anyway, yeah, I mean I had it as favorite question mark in the sense that I wouldn't really say it's my favorite, but it's in the top list somewhere.
Okay. And one more thing, you did mention the horns. I didn't write it down, but I definitely
Yeah.
thought about that during the song. That was actually one of the reasons I didn't like it, just because I felt the
Wow.
horns were something I liked, but then I thought it was going to amp up into something not poppier or whatever, but just like kind of better. I don't know. It was just like a lead-in, you know? I thought it was going to lead into something good, and I just never found that. But that's all I got to say about Sober.
So for Mateo, Sober is like a farce where it's like you feel like there's something ahead, but it just stops.
I felt there was a lot of potential with Sober.
Okay.
Like there was a lot
Okay.
of, it was a wasted potential. That's what I felt, and I think that's why I ended up just putting it as my least favorite track of the album.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Fair enough. Fair enough. Let's get into the third track then. That's Homemade Dynamite. I'll start off for this one.
Okay.
For me, this is one that I guess I used to like before. Not like a lot, but I would say it's gotten slightly worse over time, maybe. It does have a slower tempo to it. It sort of is more of I would say this one has more of a pop leaning to. I would say most of these songs are sort of pop alternative kind of mixed together. Interestingly, I guess this is a good time to bring up the fact that this is not necessarily how Lorde has sounded in her first album, Pure, I guess, Heroine, Heryne, Pure Heroine, or, yeah, I think in that one, I guess what Wikipedia says at least is that there was more of a minimalist style, and I have heard that other album too. And it's definitely more of a strong anti-pop lean, in fact. So if you ever go back, Mateo, go back and listen to that first album, which had songs like Royals in it, which well, just think about it. I mean, you've listened to Royals, which has this very different sound from what you hear here. So it's just so much more just pop, electro pop, and
Okay, I understand that. Yeah, I got that.
You know what I'm saying? It's just like it's very different, and I think Homemade Dynamite is one of the ones where she's very much into a pop genre here, and not my worst track still per se, but definitely sort of maybe even my on the worst side. I think it doesn't age that well. It's a little simplistic, I would say. I think the text setting, a couple places, the way she does sort of things with her lyrics and the way she uses her voice is sort of interesting.
Oh, yeah. Oh, definitely. I agree with
Yeah.
that.
Looks like you're going into a more positive review than I am, so I'm
maybe
curious.
A little more positive,
Okay.
but I definitely agree with some of the stuff you just said. So like, I'm not sure if I ever even mentioned this before, but usually I hate when artists get really airy and kind of breathy with their voice in songs. I don't know if you know what I mean in Homemade Dynamite, but she kind of gets like that, and because usually I find out it kind of gets like way too mumbly, but in Homemade Dynamite I thought it was actually done not pretty well, but it was done well, you know, especially with the lyrics, just when she was like repeating like DD Dynamite and stuff,
Yeah.
and in the chorus and whatnot, and I thought that was done well, more than other artists do, and to go off that into something else, what you said earlier about some lyrics and you know how Lorde kind of breaks kind of the song and kind of just stops and stuff, and I just wrote down when she literally says like pew or like boom or it was something like that, and I just
something
thought
like
that was
now
just,
I
like,
think that this is, or I don't have the lyrics in front of me, but it's something she makes like the sound, right?
Like, boom or something. I was just like, that's just like too cheesy. I don't know. That just like
I think
took
it's
me out of
playful.
it.
I think it's playful. I mean, I know some people find it maybe cringe-worthy or
I
cheesy.
thought it was a
I
little
get it.
cringe.
I can get it. I see what you're saying. But I think it's playful. Yeah, I don't mind that part. I think it's creative. I wouldn't say it's cringeworthy. So agree to disagree. But I know where your
so.
I can try to understand what it is. So I think if we have any listeners who also listen to the first episode, they're already seeing a very different dynamic for us already.
Yeah,
Where
we're
this
basically,
is why
I feel like we're disagreeing on every single track now. Yeah.
this is why we called the podcast Aux Fiends, guys, because we really don't agree most of the time. Like right now, I think what she did with that was playful and creative, but Mateo thinks it's totally cringeworthy. Although I do understand what he's saying too, because just doing something of that sort while you're in a song and having that playfulness, I understand why certain people might think it pulls you out of the song, or you're just kind of like, why did you need to do that or whatever. But regardless, I think this is anyway one of her weaker songs, so I'm not gonna defend it extensively. But
that's good.
Yeah, it's not too bad, but it's definitely one of the slightly weaker tracks on the album for sure.
Yeah.
So moving on to the Louvre, named of course after the famous museum in France. In case you don't know what the Louvre is.
I don't know what that is. Yeah.
Yeah. But just in case, Mateo, start us off about this museum-based song.
Okay, yeah, museum-based song. That's what it should have been titled, sure.
Whoa.
I feel like this was the first time in the album I was actually paying attention to the lyrics. Mm-hmm. Now, I don't know if that was just because when I kind of smartened up and opened up, like, the Genius link of, like, the lyrics and started, like,
maybe
just reading them off a little bit. It could have been that, but it was also just like I felt this is kind of when I wanted to hear the lyrics a little more.
Mm-hmm.
But all I can say is like I thought it was actually pretty good up until the pre-chorus and chorus. Like I liked all the verses, but the actual chorus just did not stick with me. You know, this is like exact kind of like repetitiveness I don't like a lot.
Okay.
And with the lyrics and whatnot. And that's all I kind of got to say with that. Like, I didn't love the Louvre, or how you called it, the museum-based song. You know?
The museum-based song is just super descriptive because now you know, hey, it's based on a museum. But yeah, I love this song.
Yeah?
I mean, there's no other way to put it. I love this song. I think, probably my favorite song on the album.
Whoa.
Weirdly enough, it's one of the ones that maybe isn't super good for casual listening. It sort of is, it sort of isn't. But I would say, I think somehow, like with Discovery, I felt like I had a very clear favorite. Here, I have a couple different favorites. But if I had to pick a clear favorite, I would go with this one. So for the record, I will say it's this one.
Whoa, okay.
Just as the track begins, the acoustic guitar kind of just captures your attention, especially when you're coming off a track like Homemade Dynamite, which has more of a mechanical pop, tone to it. Maybe it had something to do with that too, the fact that it was after that song. But just the guitar sound at the beginning, I always find super refreshing to listen to. I think, just any track that begins with acoustic guitar and then kind of goes into something different is always interesting. There's a lot of interesting sound mixing in this one, different textures of sound. Spoken word in this one for sure here too. I think there's a portion where she says they'll hang us in the Louvre and all these sort of very like, I don't disagree that it's very romanticized sort of writing, but it's also very eloquent writing too in terms of going into songwriting and lyrics. And it's interesting that you brought up the fact that at least the lyrics kind of caught your attention in this one.
Yeah, definitely.
They're like, the way I would explain Lorde's writing style, at least through this album, is that it has like cheesiness to it in some areas. I can agree there, but there's also an elevation to the way that she writes the lyrics. I think she uses a lot of elevated, eloquent, almost like poetic language to get across some, I wouldn't even say cheesy, but more just like strongly emotional ideas. And I think it has a lot of emotion and angst, this entire album, but it's done through a lot of good songwriting. And this is probably a good time to mention that there was a point where I was such a good fan of Lorde's that I wrote a little article on one of my websites, which I can put down in the link. I did. And it was called something like Lorde and then it was like colon the best alternative songwriting or something like that. I definitely
big claim. Big claim.
It's a big claim. I wouldn't agree with it today, but I will say the songwriting still stands out to an extent for me. I think it's unique, especially for younger pop artists to be writing at that level. At a level which feels poetic and feels eloquent in that nature. But anyway, that's enough about sound writing. Back to the Louvre, the museum-based song.
Yeah.
I like the song because it has a it's catchy, but it's also interesting, sonically interesting, I would say. I also love the sort of ending to it, that guitar, like that dissonant guitar sound, like those very like, you can hear the strings, they're very like raw and exposed in this particular track. I really like how they did that. But at the same time, it also sounds melodic as well. So it's sort of interesting how the song ends. I really like the song, Tay. I'm not gonna lie. It's great.
Okay. I mean, you said it was your favorite, yeah?
Yeah, it's my favorite. Okay, so I would say it's almost like a tie, but I would go with this one as my official favorite. But we'll get into the almost tie pretty soon. Yeah, we'll get into it.
Pretty soon. Okay.
Pretty soon. But it wouldn't be the next track, which is Liability. That's not the one. But let's talk about Liability. Mateo, what did you think of this song?
Okay, so I feel like you think I'm gonna hate this song or something. I liked it more than I think you think.
Okay.
This is when I noticed that Lorde does a lot of repetition with like the first kind of letters, you know what I mean? Like we heard that before with the Homemade Dynamite, but I feel like this is what I heard it a lot. I don't really like it. But when you compare Liability against Sober, I felt like this song knew its place. Like
that almost sounds condescending, actually.
No.
It does, but continue.
Okay, maybe it is condescending. I don't know, but it just knew its place. Like it stayed low and it didn't try to amp us up. There was no trickery involved in Liability. There was no liability with Liability.
What?
You know what I mean?
All right, well, hold on. Let me just dissect what you just said because I'm very confused. Define trickery. Like, do you feel that like a song like Sober doesn't have like what are you saying? Are you saying that it doesn't have like the lyrical quality enough that it should have like a big larger than life? I don't understand.
I think I was just maybe so disappointed with Sober. Because I thought it was gonna go somewhere and I thought it was gonna amp me up enough to like get somewhere pretty good in the song. But it's just where like Liability.
It's consistent.
Straight up, it's consistent throughout the song, and that's what I meant. Where like I felt like the song kind of knew its place, and it didn't try to stray away from it. It didn't try to get like super uber creative or kind of out there. It was just kind of there. It recognized what kind of song it was. Okay. And it was good. Yeah.
Okay, that's interesting. I mean, for me, a lot of what makes Melodrama unique is the way that there's like experimentation with sort of different. Well, I wouldn't even say experimentation, but just a lot of different genres going into one song. That said, I know what you're saying about Liability. I wouldn't give it necessarily extra points for being consistent, but I think it is consistent in the fact that it's easily a very simple, sort of elegant song. Again, just piano and voice. Definitely something that would highlight Lorde's vocal talent. I like how she sings this song, you know. It's very honest, it's raw, it's a sad song, obviously, and it's simple, and it has a romanticized quality to it too, even though it's sort of sort of sad. But I wouldn't necessarily say like, you know, something like Sober is just too all over the place and Liability is more consistent. I would say more like Sober, a song like Sober would kind of has the sort of range that I like, whereas Liability also is good in its own sense where it's consistent. I wouldn't necessarily dock it off or give it extra points for being consistent, if that makes sense. But that's interesting. So. I'm interested. I find it interesting that you liked it more than I thought I would, because I thought you would have. I thought you were about to just absolutely hate on it because.
No. Just like, I mean, I don't think you were right with saying that like I thought Sober was just like going all over the place. It was more that
Okay.
maybe I misused the word of like saying trickery or just being tricked.
Yeah.
I was just more let down.
Like disappointed. Okay.
Yeah, I was
Yeah.
just I thought it could go somewhere pretty good with the
Uh-huh.
song, and then that's why I think I just found some comfort with I Ability, where it was just
Yeah.
kind of you said it right, consistent throughout the song, and
Sure,
like
sure.
it went where it needed to go, but it
Mhm.
didn't push too many boundaries.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
not it's not cutting edge per se, but it's always refreshing because personally I'm someone who really likes very singer focused tracks. I mean, obviously I love something like Discovery too, where it's all about the production, especially with EDM, it's so strongly focused on production, trying different beats and all that stuff I love as well. But there's something about just the purity of a great singer and a piano, and I think the way that Liability is composed, the way that's sung, highlights the talents of a singer. And I think I just love artists who have strong vocal talent, and that's why I love this song is because everything else is great too. It's the best of both production and vocals, but this one's strictly vocals, and I like it for that. So I like the song as well. Again, not my favorite, but not my least favorite either. I'd say this is a pretty strong song. So with that, we'll get into the next track, which is a sort of two tracks in one. This one's called Hard Feelings / Loveless. I think, honestly, for my notes, I split up these two songs, so I
Yeah,
think that's how
same,
we'll go about it, and then we can
same.
talk a little bit about how they mesh together as well. So Hard Feelings, Mateo, do you have any hard feelings harbored against this song?
Maybe I do a little bit of hard feelings. I know I just got
Okay.
done saying that I have separate notes for him, and I do, but it's just like I have to compare the two. This was definitely I did not like Hard Feelings as much as Loveless, but to
Ouch.
stick on Hard Feelings, I thought this was actually another good instance of Lorde using the breathiness with the lyrics
Uh-huh.
hard feeling, you know,
Yeah.
and just overall, it was just kind of there for me. The song, I didn't I don't want to get too much into Loveless yet, but I just didn't have much feeling for this song. It was just pretty one of those middle of the ground kind of songs. If just counting Hard Feelings for me, yeah. What about you? Just for Hard Feelings.
I love this track as well.
Whoa.
We'll get into Loveless in a minute. I mean, I'm talking strictly about Hard Feelings
Yeah.
because let's be real, this is two different songs that
Yeah.
I remember reading about why Lorde mashed the two songs together too, or what sort of the process that she had. I think she felt like these two went together well. We'll talk about that. I have some
Yeah.
thoughts about
We will
that.
definitely talk about that.
Spoiler alert, they don't go well together, but
Yeah.
anyway, I love Hard Feelings. I think it's probably easily one of the more one of the tracks is like extremely rife with emotion. I think sound mixing grade is here, a lot of different texture work, just different textures played around with here as well. That distorted sound at the end, that whole sort of section with like the distorted sounds, I love that part. I think that's one of the reasons I found Melodrama so interesting, even just like I guess 3 years ago or so, is because I really liked how all those like I guess I'm trying to find a good word for it, but I'll just use sounds. They sound dissonant and they sound very harsh. But when the way they're kind of arranged makes it sound sort of melodic. I think there's something really just profound about that from a song point of view. So this is easily one of my favorites. This was probably one that was almost tied with the Louvre, just Hard Feelings by itself. But since it's technically two songs, I'm not gonna say it's my favorite in any way. Maybe I like the Louvre a little bit better anyway. So, but easily one of my favorite portions of this album is Hard Feelings for sure. You sounded neutral to it, which is like
Yeah.
okay. I mean, do you feel like how does it compare to the other tracks?
Uh, like I said, to me it was kind of middle of the ground. I mean, I gotta be honest with you, Rishabh. I literally listened to this an hour ago, and I don't really remember much of it, other
Okay.
than just liking the good use of the breathiness. But then, other
hmm
than that, I was kind of whatever about it. You know, and that's all just for Hard Feelings. I mean, as the tracks as a whole, to come with the two, I do have some feelings for that. If you look at them as a single unit, but just for the first half,
Yeah. One thing I will say, this is sort of a criticism toward the whole album in a sense, is that a lot of the songs, I will admit, mash together in your mind quite a bit. I mean, I just listen. Maybe it's because I just listened to the album too. Or maybe that's actually more evidence of the fact that they mash together, the fact that I just listened to it and I still have sometimes a hard time differentiating between some of them. I think the ones that really stand out are probably, I guess, musically is something like Liability, because it's so different from the rest of the songs. So I can kind of understand that, but I think this is one definitely you listen to the whole album too, rather than track by track. So.
Oh, okay. We'll get into that. I think so. I want to save that until I do the whole album review. Okay, I gotta save that. I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves. We still haven't even covered Loveless yet.
You haven't, and you're already taking deep breaths of just like exhaustion as we review the album.
Well, I'm just so exhausted just with the album, with Hard Feelings, with Sober. Oh, that's all I can say. I mean, okay, let's get back on track with Loveless.
Okay, let's get back on track with Loveless.
I thought Loveless was far superior than Hard Feelings. How? Okay, let me get into this.
Loveless.
I don't know. I just thought it was, and here's the thing. I actually thought.
I'm shocked, honestly, that you would think this is better. This doesn't seem anything up your alley.
Really?
It's way worse. Yeah.
I don't think. I don't. None of this is up my alley. Well, I'll say that.
Well, I know, but I know.
But like. Even so, I mean, even maybe I'm agreeing with your side. It's like it almost sounded like Loveless was like made in GarageBand, if you know what I mean. I don't know if you've ever like fooled around with GarageBand, but like I have.
That sort of down, but
it just sounds like they use kind of the basic beats or whatever. They didn't use like any new plugins or anything like that. It just sounded like they made this on their MacBook like in 2013 or something. But like,
how do you like this more? How do you like this more?
I think I just liked. Just the vocals and the instrumental together better than Hard Feelings. I mean, this is going to be bleeding over a little into my question for the song as a whole, where it's kind of like, I don't get why this is a double feature, if you can call that. Like, I don't get it at all.
There.
I even wrote down, like, no, really, why? Like, I don't know if I gotta, like, look at the lyrics again or something. I don't know what I missed. I mean, I had the lyrics open. I don't know if I'd, like, skipped over something. To me, this track as a whole is kind of a lead-in into my feelings as an album as a whole, where it's just kind of like, I don't feel like they really work together. You know, that's all I got really to say about this.
We can talk about that. We can talk about that.
I just feel like it's just kind of there.
All right.
I mean, what are your thoughts on Loveless?
I have a lot to respond to what you just said, starting with...
Go ahead, respond.
How do you like this more than Hard Feelings? Let me just go through my review of Loveless real quick first. So this has some trap beats. It's very pop, which is like, I don't understand how this is your track that you like more than Hard Feelings. It's like just so poppy. I mean, it's like the definition of pop. Like the sort of like, it almost sounds like soulless pop in some places. Just gonna say that. Sounds like a demo. That's kind of why I was agreeing with your GarageBand point, because it sounds like a demo.
It does.
It fades out super early. Did you notice that? That it fades out very early?
Well, not to sidetrack you, but I even thought when listening, I'm like, wait, maybe this is why Lorde put it and like mash it up with Hard Feelings, just because she didn't know how to finish up Loveless, you know? Like I don't know if Lorde had no idea what to do with the rest of the song or what, but like if you compare the times, I even have the time open for the entire song.
Mm-hmm.
For this track, it was 6 minutes whole.
But like 4 minutes for Hard Feelings, essentially.
Yeah, it barely felt like a minute for Loveless.
Yeah,
which means even then I still like Loveless better though. I don't know.
Which means it's practically an interlude. This is, for me, I said interlude, because this is an interlude song. So I fail to get how you're so positive on an interlude track. What I believe to be an interlude track. It's
that's
weak,
not me being positive against the whole album. This is just the two songs together. Overall, this song is I mean, obviously it's not on my bottom. That's sober. But like this is low
Oh
down.
my
This is
gosh.
low down. This is definitely
Okay,
low
yeah,
down.
Loveless is down for me too. I'm gonna go ahead and say this is my least favorite. And there was another one that I was considering. I mean, I hadn't fully decided my worst till now, but definitely it's Loveless.
Wait, so are you saying just Loveless or Hard Feelings slash?
Just
I don't
Loveless.
know.
Our
You
Feelings
can't
is
do
probably
that.
one of my favorites. See, that's the weird thing about this track is we have to
So
both
it's
talk
middle of the
about it
ground for
as
you. That's what I was saying before with like some other ones. Like it's just like middle of the ground for you then. Because
yeah.
if you really liked Hard Feelings but you didn't like Loveless at all, that's middle. That's definitely middle.
But they're two different tracks. Come on.
They are, but they're not. If you look at the album
Okay,
listing,
well,
they're there
but
together with just
I
a
really
slash
like
in
Hard
between.
Feelings, so I mean that's
I mean,
unfair.
come on, you got to be fair with.
Okay,
How would you rate
okay.
it together though? Because
Gotta-
that is at the end of the day that is what it is. So sure, I understand if you think Loveless is
Yeah,
like the worst, right? But
it's worse in
together,
that sense.
that's how it's being presented. Like no one's gonna be just pulling up Melodrama and then like okay, let me like skip ahead 4 minutes in. Let me see, you know, like or like let me stop at 4 minutes if I don't want to hear Loveless or if I don't want to hear Loveless, I'm skipping in and getting a minute of track. Like that's how it is. This is that's what this song is.
You just skip Loveless, or you listen to Loveless because it doesn't matter. It's an interlude. It's fine. I mean, it's not great, but it's fine as an interlude because it lasts like a
interlude,
minute.
Though. It is in the middle of the album, but I feel like
Yeah.
there's some other interludes later on in this album that we'll get into later.
I hope you're not talking about the next track as an interlude because that's not an interlude. Let's be real.
We'll get to it when we get to it. Maybe it is. Maybe that's not what I'm saying.
All right, well, let's get to it now because I'm curious about whether you think Sober 2, which is our next track, is an interlude. Sober 2, in parentheses, Melodramas. This is sort of titled, for the album.
Yeah, I even wrote
Mateo,
that.
do you think this is an
Self-title,
interlude?
insert, kinda. Just like, LOL, it's kind of funny. No, this is not what I thought was an interlude.
Okay,
you might be
good.
surprised how much I hate the first Sober. I thought this was leagues better.
Okay.
Leagues.
Okay.
I was wondering about its placement though. Like, why specifically was Sober 2 this far later in the track? I mean, what? It's 5 tracks later. Like, I really didn't understand its placement. I mean, other than that, I don't have too much to say about it. Other than I thought it was way better. I even actually thought it might have been one of the top tracks for me of the album. But I really was just kind of confused. And that goes for a lot of the songs on this album. Where I was just really confused about the placement. I mean, do you know anything about the placement for this? Or I mean, what do you think?
But I don't mind the placement of this song. It's I can understand what you're saying, but I mean, it would sort of feel sort of in your face if it was track 1, and definitely feel in your face if it was the last track.
Yeah.
And I think it's sort of like a middle portion of it. I wouldn't say it's the interlude. I would say Loveless is the interlude. But I like this track. I used to love this track, by the way. When I listened to this album before 3 years ago, I used to think it's really great. Now I can see. It's a little gimmicky, but it's also sort of cool. It starts with sort of classical instrumentation, has like an orchestral sound. It sounds epic, dramatic. The drama keeps building with like this trap beat. It's easily one of the most like dramatic, angsty songs of the whole album. It's just very larger than life, but also sort of short, which I think is maybe one of its biggest issues is that it sounds like a intro to a song almost. I wouldn't go as far as saying it's like as demo level as something like Loveless. I think it holds as a complete song fairly well, but I definitely don't like it as much as I did before, but I still like it, if that makes sense. I mean, it's for sure hasn't aged as well as I hoped it would, but yeah, I think it's a cool song. I think I definitely like the sort of dramaticness of this song. As for comparing it to Sober, I don't know. I think I like Sober a little bit more. I used to probably say Sober 2 is better before, but I kind of like Sober more. Because Sober 2
I need
is
to past you. No way. This was leagues better.
all right, well,
I don't know.
actually, more that I think about it, I would say I would say like Sober 2 could have been an interlude if Loveless was any better. Right now, since Loveless is so trash, it sounds like an interlude. I'm just saying, like Sober 2 could have been a great it would have been a strong interlude too. It wouldn't have been like a pass interlude. Like it would have been a cool interlude that has the name of the album in it. But instead we have Loveless just ruining like pretty much everything. Loveless sounds just like very mechanically pop to me. Like, and the spelling part is just like, all right. I mean, it's catchy, but it's just it's more flat than anything. But anyway, we'll move on from Loveless and the trauma that apparently has been induced by it for me.
Yeah, apparently.
Well, I like Sober too. It's good. It's a solid track. It could have probably been a little bit better. I think it's one of the ones where I feel like, yeah, could have used a little bit more, but yeah, I liked it. Let's move into the next track then. The next track is called Rider in the Dark. Mateo?
I just it's hard to even communicate how I feel. It's just like a bunch of just imagine me around my head with a bunch of question marks. Like,
wow, okay.
Was this song mixed differently? Like, it felt way louder. Like, I didn't touch my volume at all. It just sounded different, you know? I could automatically, when listening to the song, I was just like, what are these lyrics? I'm absolutely not the target audience for definitely Lorde, but definitely Rider in the Dark. Like, I don't know. I will say, though, for this track, I actually really did like the chorus, though. But, like, if you break it down to its bones and separate parts, it just didn't totally make sense to me, like, overall, you know?
Okay.
Yeah.
For me, this is very similar to Liability in the way that it's constructed. I would say easily this is one of the weakest songs of the album for me, too. I would say after Loveless, if we don't count Hard Feelings / Loveless as a song, then I would say this is my least favorite of the album, you know?
Okay, that's your least favorite.
Yeah. It's similar to Liability. I like, again, the fact that it is highlighting vocal talents, I guess. And the fact that it has piano, and I like the classical strings, and it has like a different tonality from Liability, but it's easily more forgettable than Liability. I think Liability just has a stronger emotion to it. Rider in the Dark, again, it's a good song. I'd listen to it just for the sake of like the simple structure of it, just listening to Lorde's great voice. But yeah, it's not the best. It's sort of maybe even overly simple. I don't love the tonality of this song. I think it's all right. It's a passable song for me. Yeah, I can sort of agree with you. I think you might just feel more than confused than like lukewarm like I do on this song. So I would say lukewarm's the word for me. So
no, that's fair. That's fair.
Yeah,
it's kind of lukewarm. Like, I absolutely I just like immediately understood, like, didn't feel like the song was for me.
Yeah.
You know, I guess you obviously feel the same way.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but just like overall, it's just a pass for me.
Okay. Yeah, I'm pretty much similar. I think I'm probably a little bit more positive, but pretty similar, I would say. So let's move into Supercut, which is, we're actually nearing the end of this album, everyone, because
track 9.
This is a very short, very, very short album.
Yeah.
So let's talk about Supercut. I'll start off for this one. Even when I used to listen to this album before, I always enjoyed the lyrics of the song. I think they're quite thoughtful. Again, sort of an upbeat, again, pop-like, aspirational, but also super epic song. I think this song also has great dance rhythms. This is easily one of the ones that definitely fits into the electropop genre, maybe even just the dance genre, if that's a genre you could say.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's a melodic song. I think I like the part also where she, like, again, the music stops and she's just, I can't remember if she speaks or sings, but there's this part where, like, all the music stops and it's just sort of her voice. Like that part. I like sort of the end muffle part of the song. And what I like about this song the most is that for the whole album, and this is kind of going into why I say this is good as a full album, and there's sort of some background information I have on this album to sort of back that up as well, is that for me, Supercut is like a very strong crescendo for the album. It's sort of the high point, or like if this were a movie, then it would be like the climax of the movie. For me, that's what Supercut is. It's very in your face, very upbeat, pop-like, but also just very upbeat and has a lot of different dynamic sounds going for it. So I really like this track. I think, again, it's one of my top tracks. I think this is one that I've enjoyed a lot before as well, and it holds up really well too. So easily somewhere up there with Louvre or something like Hard Feelings. Definitely one of my favorites. Mateo, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm not sure if I'm going to surprise you or not, but the Supercut was actually my favorite song on this album.
I'm not that surprised. Yeah, I figured you may.
Yeah,
sort of
I think you said it right. I think why I kind of like it is because you're kind of like the dance music or like electro pop. To me, I hate to bring up Sober again, but I feel Supercut beats up in a good way. It actually does it. It gives me what I was expecting, and it made me feel happy when listening to it again. You know? And actually, weird enough that I wrote this down, but I guess no, it's a separate song. But I felt like I heard kind of Coldplay vibes again. You know, I thought that was the one in with Sober, but no, that
Green Light, I think you said.
Light, yeah, Green Light, yeah. It's interesting that both of these kind of gave me. I'm not sure if you heard them, kind of early Coldplay vibes. You know, I wonder if it had the same exact producers or something on this track, whoever mixed it and made the beats and all that stuff. But overall, I did like Supercut. Yeah.
Okay. It was good. I wouldn't say I can kind of understand Coldplay. I didn't say I would feel that super strongly, but yeah, I think it's definitely one of the more upbeat tracks, and I can kind of understand why people might like it for that reason too. I think Sober is still a great song, but I think the tonality of it is just different from Supercut. Supercut it's weird because it's an upbeat song, but if you listen to the lyrics, it's sort of kind of melancholic and sad and sort of just like, I can't really explain it, but it's sort of about Lorde just kind of thinking or writing about how everything about a relationship per se would sound, just seems better in what would be like a Supercut rather than in real life. So it has a sad aspect to it, but it's done in this very larger than life and upbeat way. So I really like this track for sure. So let's get into the next track. This is Liability Reprise. This is actually not technically a reprise since it's not Liability as we heard it for the first time. I'll start off for this one too. For me, this is actually one this is the one that might have weirdly worked as a good double feature, as you were saying, with Supercut maybe. I think if Supercut is sort of like the big climactic song, then this is sort of the just like the falling part of after the climax where things are just sort of settled down, and it sort of brings the album to a wind up in a sense, or heads towards the wind up, which is the last track, which is what we'll be discussing next. Yeah, it's probably one of the, I could say, least favorite ones, but this is one that I don't actively just hate either, and I kind of like how it sounds with Supercut. So in the context of the album, I like this one. It's fine. I like it.
Okay. So
what do you think?
One of the first things I wrote was like, Liability again? You know, this is the one I almost thought could almost work as an interlude-ish, but it's like, it doesn't make sense, I guess, because it's the 10th track on an 11-track album, you know? Like, I don't know if that kind of makes sense, where it's just kind of almost the latest interlude, and again, I'm super confused on all these placements for all the different songs on this track. I felt like it was just kind of maybe put there, I don't know, maybe it kind of works just because it is towards the end before you kind of amp up with the track right after this, but like, at the end of the day, I was kind of whatever on this song. I think maybe you felt kind of
similar.
The same. It wasn't a super favorite of mine. It wasn't super disfavorite of mine. You know,
yeah.
I was kind of neutral about it. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say I'm neutral about it as a track by itself, for sure. I think it just accompanies well with Supercut for me for some reason. I think it's the fact that maybe Supercut is this very upbeat song, and this is a little low-key, almost interlude type track that follows right after, and somehow just fits together like a puzzle for me, and it heads towards the end of the album quite nicely, which is why I wouldn't say it's just like the worst thing ever. I think it's not the greatest thing, or even close to the middle maybe, but yeah, I just somehow feel like it works with Supercut in that maybe it should have even been paired more than something like Hard Feelings and Loveless. So, but there isn't a lot to talk about this one for sure. So let's head into the final track of the album. Right before we go into this, it's worth mentioning that there is like a remix for Homemade Dynamite available on Spotify, but Mateo
Spotify
actually,
bonus track. Also, I'm not sure if I even told you this too. There actually is a Japanese bonus track too for Greenlight. There's a Greenlight remix. I just like looked at the wiki for this, and so I guess those are both technically the track 12, but I don't think you listened to them. I didn't.
I did not. I listened to a little bit of the remix for Homemade Dynamite, but I did not listen to all of it for sure.
Yeah.
Never heard of the Japanese version for Greenlight. I want to listen to that though. But yeah, so technically speaking, if you were listening to this on something like vinyl, Perfect Places would be the end of the album, so that's what we're going to end with.
Yeah.
Perfect Places, Mateo, what did you think?
It's weird to say, but this felt like Lorde, if you get what I mean.
That's pretty much how I feel about it too.
Yeah, this felt like Lorde. This is definitely a Lorde song. I don't even know how I even came to that in my mind, just because this is definitely the most Lorde I've ever listened to and probably will ever listen to. I definitely thought Perfect Places was one of the better tracks. That was actually almost closer up there. Definitely did not beat Supercut for me, but I definitely thought it was better overall than some of the weaker tracks on this album. And I just need to highlight this before I transition to your review of this. I wrote down these lyrics that were saying. It said, "Can't stand to be alone, but all I can feel is I can be alone without Lorde's music." That's all I feel,
Wow. Okay. Harsh. We'll get into the album review soon, guys. Yeah, but I agree with you in the fact that it's a definitive Lorde song. It's sort of like a mishmash of a lot of the elements of the other songs, but it's also not as cutting edge as something like Supercut or Sober or even to some extent, maybe even Homemade Dynamite. I'd say it's almost at the level of Homemade Dynamite. It's maybe, I would say it's about the same. I can't quite decide if it's better or worse than that song, but good mix of elements of all the other songs. Pretty good conclusion song, I'd say. I think this is
I would agree.
A good one to conclude with.
I agree.
It sort of is very much just like, this is Lorde, this is her style. And that's what we're ending with. Again, techno, pop, piano, a lot of the stuff that we've heard before kind of makes an appearance here. Solid conclusion to a great album, Mateo. Let's talk about the album.
About that. I don't even know. I don't know if you want me to go first or you want to go first with the album review, because I have a good amount to say.
Okay. I'll start off because I'm going to read a little bit from the Wikipedia page too, and sort of defend some of the reasons why I think it works well as an album too, rather than just tracks. So this album has been, I'm just going to read some parts straight off the Wikipedia. So if you're looking for this information or want to read up again, it's available on the Wikipedia page. But this album's been described as a loose concept album, actually, that explores the theme of solitude. And believe it or not, this is something even I find hard to believe, and it's something I'm going to revisit after this episode, maybe. It follows the framework of a single house party and the events and moods that ensue. So this is meant to be listened to together, and it's sort of going through, I don't want to say a narrative, but a very just uniform theme of like a single house party or some of the, I guess, how they say events and moods that come with that. So beyond just this background information, I think this album plays well as an album. I think certain tracks are definitely lending themselves to solo listen. I think Greenlight, despite the fact that, it's gotten a lot of radio airplay and it's very easy to go hate on songs that have been played on the radio, Greenlight holds up as a track. And and I think it works as a single track. Definitely one you can listen to on the radio as well. For sure, something like The Louvre, which was my favorite track off the album, or easily one of my most favorite, that works as a single track. For me, Sober works as a single track. And for sure, Supercut works as a single track. Those are the ones that I feel works really strongly as single tracks. But I think if you listen all the way down, beginning to end, there is sort of something of a musical journey with the album. Is it something as strong of something like Discovery? Not necessarily in quality, but
no way.
No. I'm saying, is it as strong of a journey in general? I'm not talking about quality, so we'll talk about that
again. I don't think that either. Actually, I mean, I'll get into it with my review of it.
We'll talk about it. We'll talk about it. We will.
Definitely.
Anyway, I think I got a little off topic there, but
all right.
Yeah, what I'm saying is that, like, if you listen to this beginning to end versus if you listen to something like Discovery beginning to end, I think as an album, like, all the songs work together better in Discovery. But focusing directly on Melodrama, I would say it still works together as an album. Maybe there are other albums that work better together, but I think this is one definitely to listen to as a whole album. When it comes to like how the album has aged for me over the past 3 years, I was surprised to find how much I still really like the music in this album. It's definitely not as much as I used to like it, but I still really, really like it. I think this holds up as a really strong album. I think it's maybe a little bit better than Lorde's first album too, which had a very different style, and that maybe we'll talk about some other time on a different episode, maybe. But it has a lot of different influences. I hear a lot of pop here. I hear a lot of electronic music. I hear a lot of classic orchestral music. I hear great singing. I hear interesting, like, almost sort of avant-garde styles here too. So it's a lot of genres coming together, held by a strong voice, and I think it comes through as a full-on album. I was going to go 9 out of 10 for this album too, just like Discovery, because it is such an influential for me, especially for the fact that it aged so well for me as well. Whoa. After talking about it, I'm going to go with 8.5 as my final. I think
8.5.
8.5. Come on. Cut me some slack here.
This is you being at least subjective, right? This is not your objective view out of all music and everything, right? This is just your personal taste influencing those numbers, right?
No, this is objective. This is totally objective.
No.
Well,
I've been doing subjective. I mean, at least for my rating of it. I'll get into that after I kind of go down. But
let's get into your review, because I want to hear what you say, and then I'll add some stuff later if I need to.
So, like, just for my personal, subjective thoughts, like, I went into this thinking I was not gonna like it, not gonna like it at all. I did not want to listen to this. I mean, Aux Fiends, it's in the name, When I came out of it, I was extremely neutral about it.
Okay.
I think the best way to say it is, I'm not necessarily disappointed I listened to it all the way through. I think it's good that I have a good taste of what Lorde's music summed up kind of could be, and especially full album length of it. But I just don't feel like I ever need to hear, maybe that's too harsh, maybe hear the album or the tracks again. To me, this is definitely not my style of music, and I think the exact words I put it for Rider in the Dark, which I said, I'm not the target audience. That's what I at least felt. I didn't feel like I was the audience. I didn't feel like these just songs weren't for me, or even if they were, they just didn't match up with how I like my music overall. I need to say this. It's not a bad album at all, and I can definitely absolutely see why you like it and other people will like it. But just for me, it's just not in my taste. It's just not in my music taste, and that's kind of why I gotta kind of come down and give it a 5 out of 10. Now, here's the thing. You may think that's terrible. No. That's to me, 5 out of 10 is just in the neutral.
Yeah, 5 out of 10 is
I
neutral,
liked it a little bit. 4, starting to dislike it, to hate it, to 0. I'm more balanced with my 0 to 10s, in the ratings, but just it is kind of funny. We went from Discovery, where I did 10 out of 10, just all the way to having it, to completely neutral.
Well, Discovery was one that I know we both love.
Yeah.
So this is one that I for sure was fairly certain you wouldn't love at least.
I mean, it was
and
your
that
pick,
I would like because I had listened to it earlier, but yeah.
Yeah. Now to kind of go back to the overall album, not just my personal thoughts on it. To me, I'm surprised when you say you thought everything kind of worked well together, and especially saying, I mean, I guess that's how it was meant to be listened to as the concept album. I felt the complete opposite. I felt like no tracks really meshed together well, and even on the tracks that were supposed to be listened together, like the Hard Feelings / Loveless.
I agree with that one.
I felt there was no, not that every song on an album needs to be a concept album, but I just felt like there was no good transitions. There was just, not to say that it was just a mishmash of just random songs all together into one album, but I just felt there wasn't a concise story, as I guess you kind of got out of it, or that they were even trying to get out of it, like with this album, to me. And that's why I feel like, as a listener, you don't have to listen to the full album. I feel like I could have listened to this randomly, and I even said this a couple earlier times with Sober 2, Liability Reprise, and stuff, where I just didn't get or understand the orders of these tracks. And usually on other albums, not just Discovery, I can kind of say, okay, this is why this is here, this is amping up to the next song, this is kind of the interlude. I just felt you could completely just cherry pick any song off this album and listen to it, and you'd be completely fine, or even just randomize the order of the album and still listen all the way through and kind of get the same experience that I did, but maybe kind of keeping like the green light at the front and Perfect Places at the end, because I think those are definitely
those are great.
Those are good. Those are definitely some of the top hitters on the song, and then obviously I really like Supercut, so those definitely would be the kind of top 3 you kind of gotta listen to. But just like what was on the radio, green light, you didn't need to listen to all the rest of the songs. You could have just listened to that one song and you kind of got the gist of it, for me,
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like I disagree with that. Just in the sense that I agree that the songs aren't similar per se, and I think you would agree with that too. But somehow for me, well, especially with Sober 2, going back to that, Sober 2 for me is the track where, I have to go into this analogy, but when you watch a movie and there's sort of a cold open to a film, and then you start with the opening credits. For me, that's where Sober 2 is. Sober 2 is that sort of when you're 15 minutes in and then the opening credits start, which is why I kind of like it in that sense. But I feel like somehow the variation of the music actually makes it work together better as an album. I feel like, there are certain albums where it tells a very distinct narrative. I think maybe this is what they were kind of going for here as well. I would agree they kind of failed in that sense, where I didn't really get a narrative out of it. But somehow I feel like the order of the songs, the way things are laid out, despite the differences of certain tracks, I think some of them mesh together completely in your head too. But I think regardless, I felt like listening to all the way through is better than listening to the one-off. And the reason I also say that is because I listened to this album, like you, about maybe an hour ago or whatever, or just very recently before we started recording. But before that, I had kind of been listening to some of these tracks one-off in the background. And maybe it was because I was doing other things while listening to them one-off or whatever, but I just didn't feel the impact of them as much as I did listening all the way down. I feel like that's when I felt like I had a full Melodrama understanding of the, of the entire album. And I don't know, this is a great album for me. I think it might have to do with the fact that I personally, like I had mentioned in the first episode, as I said, I like many different genres, but for me, pop is something I can enjoy quite a bit. I think pop music can be good, and I think this is a sort of elevated pop music that I would like, where it has the mechanics of a pop song, but it's just more experimental, more engaging musically. If I were listening to something like a whole contemporary new Maroon 5 album, beginning to end, and just listening to it, I would be bored out of my mind because everything sounds just soulless. Whereas this uses the best parts of pop music and fleshes it out in interesting and unique ways. Melodrama is an 8.5 for me. I mean, I just dig this album. I think it's great. I think Lorde is also just a great singer-songwriter. especially when it comes to younger talent. This album, by the way, was nominated for Best Album of the Year at the Grammys. Not that those awards mean anything, but it was. It was. Just the fact.
Sure. Okay.
Not saying those awards mean anything. I mean, we
did it
can
win?
get into that. It did not win. It did not win.
Well, there you go.
Well, okay. Well, it was nominated, so. But yeah.
Okay.
Anyway, I like this album, and I think I knew from the beginning that Mateo would definitely. I thought you were going to go way more negative, so I am surprised at that. So I'm happy that you were at least lukewarm on it or neutral on it rather than like hate. But I'll pick an album that you hate soon too. I'll think of one that you'll hate even more.
All right. Just know I got to play, fight fire with fire. That's all I'm saying.
Mateo, here's where you can, take a deep breath. Is that like I'll never pick something like a Maroon 5 album because I'll hate that as much as you. So it won't be anything
That's
ever
good.
that bad.
That's good. I know.
I can't hear that.
Even when I was thinking of my album that I would pick next.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, do I want to go totally out of left field where Rishabh would not like it at all? But I'm like, well, if Rishabh, our tastes match up a little bit. I hate to say it. We are Aux Fiends. Sometimes maybe Aux Friends.
Whoa.
Very rarely. But I don't know. I think I'm the same with you. Where it's just, I don't think I'd pick a song I hated too.
Yeah.
And then just because I know you would not like that either. And so I just really like the idea of us kind of trying to surprise each other and maybe feel each other's like music tastes out, I think I'm actually glad I kind of surprised you where I wasn't super negative with this. And I am subjective with the whole album review, but I do try to get a little objective sometimes and not go total in the negatives.
Yeah, I mean, critiquing styles are just hard to describe anyway, but yeah, I mean, that's what I said in the first episode too, is that, we may end up agreeing more than we expect. And I think that's kind of already starting to happen.
Yeah.
Where we don't quite agree on this at all, but at the same time, like, looking directly only at like objective numbers, not that they are telling a complete story in any way, but 5 and 8.5 is really just a 3.5 difference, which I wouldn't say is terribly sizable. So that was interesting. That was an interesting little album to talk about. So I think that segues us into, I guess, sort of the housekeeping section.
Yeah,
this is also the section where I'll have Mateo introduce the next album, which is something we're going to start doing from now on.
Yeah.
After we released the first episode, a number of our friends, recommended to us to just let us know which albums we're going to be talking about so people have time to listen to it in advance. Unfortunately, we weren't able to do it with this one, but I highly encourage, if you haven't listened to Melodrama by this point, then go ahead and listen to it, and then maybe that'll give you a sort of new perspective on what we've talked about through this episode. We did mention we'd talk a little bit about music news. There isn't a lot that I can think of. Is there anything you can think of, Mateo, that came up recently?
Not now.
Okay.
That's why I kind of keep this as just kind of the quotations housekeeping, any quotations,
For sure.
Music news. If anything's huge out there, any new huge songs or any artist news, obviously we would talk about it here, but as of right now, I don't think there's anything. Nothing coming to mind. There's nothing huge going on.
I think, I think we're going to wrap up this episode with Mateo introducing the album pick. I have no clue what this is, by the way, so I'm excited to hear what it is and see whether it's an artist I've heard of before or not. So, Mateo, I'm going to hand you the floor, and I'm scared. But let's see.
I'm scared too. I'm nervous. I'm excited. I don't know. You definitely do not know this artist. You definitely have never heard of this album. I'd almost bet money on it. I'd even say almost all of our friends or listeners or anyone has never heard of this either. It was tough because I didn't want to go, like I said, super left field.
Yeah.
And but I don't know. I think what's kind of interesting. I know I'm all saying this before I even say what I picked. Just to preface it, I picked an album that I know you had definitely never fully listened to, and I think maybe you unconsciously picked it with Melodrama to kind of get my real thoughts on it.
Yeah.
With the album I picked, I hope to get your real thoughts on it, because we definitely have talked either about the specific genre or genres around it, and this is one of the founding kind of albums in that specific genre, and I'll definitely get into that much more.
I feel like I have an idea of where this is going, but okay,
I
go
think
ahead.
you think wrong though. I think you think of an album that I'm not gonna pick.
Okay.
This is more of just the concrete. This is the solid ground. This is one of the star albums of the specific genre I'm thinking of. And so the album, let me know if you've heard this before.
Okay.
The album I picked was Chuck Pearson's Echo Jams, Volume 1 by 10 Tricks Point Never. Have you ever heard of that?
I don't know what genre this is or whatever this is.
This is one of the founding vaporwave albums.
I figured it was going to be vaporwave. Yeah.
I don't know,
I thought it would be lo-fi or vaporwave because I know that's what you like. Right now we're recording this honestly through Skype, and I can already see your profile picture, which is the key most important vaporwave image ever.
Yeah, it's the Helios busk.
Exactly.
Bust off Floral Shop, but that's not my pick though. It's Echo Jams. Jams is my
I'm excited.
Pick.
I know that we've definitely talked about vaporwave. It's a genre I actually like. I have not delved into the roots of it though, so it's going to be fun to kind of listen to this and listen to the sort of roots of it. I think most of what I've listened to is I guess the Simpsons video the Simpsons.
Oh, Simpsons Wave.
Yeah, Simpsons Wave is similar.
I've
listened to those and I like those, so.
We'll definitely dive way deeper, and I'll get way into the history of the next,
for sure.
Episode. But this isn't the first vaporwave album, but it is definitely one of the grandfather kind of vaporwave albums. You can kind of see their early on makings, and how the kind of genre formed as a whole in this album, and I think that kind of says it all for now. Not to spoil too much for the next episode, but
for sure.
Chuck Pearson's Echo Jams Volume 1 by 10 Tricks Point Never. That's my choice for next episode. So get on it, guys. Go listen.
Get on it. I'll get on it, and then we'll talk about it in the next episode. Thanks to everyone who tuned in to listen to this Aux Fiends episode where we talked about Melodrama by Lorde. Thanks again, Mateo, for being here and listening through this entire album.
Yeah, hey, Rishabh, thanks for being here too, Thanks for not picking something I absolutely hated. Though I am neutral about it.
Okay, note to self, pick Maroon 5 album next time. Got it.
Yeah, we'll both be suffering for that. I guess one last thing I just wanted to say was we upload this podcast both on our YouTube channel, Aux Fiends, and also, what's it, Podomatic? I think.
Podomatic.
Yeah, so Podomatic, you can either find it there if you want to listen on mobile device, or you can just pull it up on YouTube or something. I think that kind of wraps it all up. Yeah.
Thanks so much for listening to our second episode now, guys. And we will see you guys in the next episode where we'll talk about Mateo's pick and review those with the tracks and the full album once again. So thanks again for listening, everybody, and we'll see you guys next time.
See you later.